Alrighty, I am just going to wait a little bit while everybody gets in here. Alrighty. If you're here, come say hi to me. During this entire live stream, don't be afraid to make a comment on what I'm saying. I can see it live feed. If you hear some rattling, that is my ferret running around, who doesn't want me to pick her up right now. All right. So, like I said, just come say hi. So what are we talking about, really? So today we are discussing my second brain surgery and why I needed a second brain surgery. Okay, so let's just jump straight in. First off, let me show you my ferret. Say hi, Trix. Say hi, baby. She's a really sweet animal. So she is probably gonna fall from there, but I'm less concerned about that because she's a tough little thing. Here, go play. So during this entire time, after the first surgery, hey Snow, nice for you to join me. After the entire surgery, the first surgery, like I said before, I was in a bunch of pain. And after 2 weeks, they said that I should have been healed and I should not be in pain. Well, that was not true. I had massive amounts of pain and it wasn't going away. Like I would walk and I would just drop to the floor and I couldn't get up. I was hurting that bad. But because they said that I should be healed, it meant that I had to be healed and nothing was wrong. So, like I said before, not long after was I taken into the emergency room following my first brain surgery, and they took x-rays and they told me everything was fine. You saw the x-rays in the last video that I did. And honestly, it was quite I wouldn't really say disappointing, but it seemed like they weren't taking me seriously when I said something was wrong. But to be fair, there really was everything wrong when I was dealing with all this stuff. It seemed like no matter what I said, they weren't going to believe me. And it sucked. It sucked that no doctor would really believe me at that point because nothing was wrong to them and the only thing was that I was in so much pain, and I had a high fever, and my pulse was skyrocketed. Now, I'm usually tachycardic, so my heart rate is usually up and elevated higher than 100, but that doesn't excuse just being pushed off to the side like nothing is wrong. Um, Obviously, there was something very wrong, and during this entire time, I never really thought that a doctor would do that to me because they were supposed to be the ones taking me seriously. Now, after that time, they sent me home saying there's nothing wrong, no pain meds to combat the massive amounts of pain that I was complaining of, and nothing to combat the fever. Just told me to go back home and rest, basically. Not 10 days after that, hey Jess, not 10 days after that did I hit the floor and pass out like I described in my last video. So I don't, like I said, I'll recap that for those of you that weren't here. I don't remember how I made it from my bedroom to the garage. I don't remember opening up the door. I don't remember or recall my parents seeing me slide down against the wall and hit the ground. I don't remember tremoring like I was having a seizure, but I wasn't. I don't remember the paramedics getting there. I don't remember being brought out on a gurney. I don't remember getting to the hospital. I don't remember anything from Kent General. They transferred me to Christiana, and I don't remember any of that transfer. I spent about a week in the hospital in Christiana. And again, they told me it was not an infection. Now, I don't remember any of that except for the last 2 days of my visit. So my last 2 days of my visit there at Christiana is all I remember. Other than that, it is a huge blank spot. It's a huge blank spot. And I can't say it enough because if somebody were to tell me something about then, I still wouldn't remember anything. I've never had an experience like that before. So basically, the day came, the last day I was there, when they were like, yeah, you're good enough to go home. We don't need to keep you on antibiotics because you don't have an infection, and just take Motrin and Tylenol and your pain should be under control. In reality, it wasn't. My pain wasn't under control, and it wasn't in check. Not 15 days after that, I woke up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. to the feeling of this huge shock wave ripple all over my body. No, Snow, this wouldn't bother me. You can share this with however many people you want. I mean, you could post it if you want. I don't mind. It's better the word gets out there. So, sorry, my ferret's being a little brat. Basically, I woke up at 4 a.m. Sorry, this is where it gets really hard for me to discuss. So just bear with me as I go through this. Just kind of like an emotional support animal. I I woke up at 4 a.m. and I felt like this pressure shock wave go throughout me, which is what woke me up. And I remember the pain was so surreal. It was like somebody was burning me internally but cutting me at the same time. It was so sharp and so searing at the same time. And I felt something wet come down my stomach, and I didn't know why. And when I when I when I peeled up the blanket to look, sorry, that was a text from my mom if you couldn't guess. Um, so basically, after all that, um, I lifted up the blanket and I turned the lights on, and I saw this kind of like really, really bright green fluid just spraying out of my stomach incision where it had been fully healed. There was now a hole where it was pressurized spraying. Um, Now, this is the first time that I'm really talking about this live, so the rest of you can understand what goes wrong with the surgery. I don't usually talk about this, and this is probably the last time that I'm going to talk about this, but I'm doing it one more time for all of you so you can understand that what happened was horrific, and what happened next would still be horrific. So I um saw it spraying like out, and the first thing I did was grab tissues and napkins and I just tried to stop it. I knew something was seriously wrong and I just was trying to stop it. I literally just wanted it all to stop. And I quickly, very, very quickly called my mom in the middle of the night and I woke her up. Um, so while calling my mom, I waited for her to pick up, obviously, but the entire time, the entire thing was very chaotic. Like, my stomach was spraying, I was screaming at my mom, like, on the phone, really, um, not necessarily, like, screaming at my mom, but, like, screaming at the dial tone while I was calling her for it to hurry up. So, with that being said, I kind of just continued on to throwing my phone down after I screamed at my mom that she needed to get in here right away. I remember her asking if it could wait, and I said, "No, I need you now. This can't wait." Um, when my mom got down to my room downstairs in the guest bedroom, because I couldn't do the stairs, she took one look at my stomach, and the look in her eyes, it's something I'll never forget. It was kind of like she looked at me and she's like, "We need to go to the emergency room." And I just remember basically, you know, with everything that happened so fast, we both looked at each other and we knew that I was not just septic, but in septic shock at that point. Um, so she drove me to Kent General Hospital, where they rushed me right back immediately. And pain meds, anti-nausea meds. They said that um, I would need to be transferred back to Kent so they could do the surgery because they knew that I needed a surgery. Um, Literally, my mom peeled it up to show the nurse what we had put on my stomach. Meanwhile, we had been changing the bandage over and over and over at least 3 times to try to get all of this pus to just stop coming out, but there was more and more and more, and it wasn't stopping. So my mom changed the bandage at the hospital, at Kent General Hospital, and put another one on there because the pus just kept rolling down my side. They gave me a lot of pain meds and anti-nausea meds, but with my fever being 103, I wasn't allowed to drink anything or eat anything because they knew I was going into surgery. But I was dying for a drink. I felt like I just couldn't drink enough. I was so thirsty that I probably could have downed a gallon of water and still have been thirsty. I think it was because the shock that my body was going into. Um, so the ride to Christiana was fine. A lot of pain with bumping and moving. That burning, searing pain this entire time never went away. When I got to Christiana, they took me immediately to the neurosurgical ICU, basically neuro ICU. I was in a really, really bad shape. I had no color. I basically looked gray, is what they told me. They told me I looked frail, stick thin, that I had no weight to me. My fever was still burning, and still I was begging for a drink. They kept my pain under control, and all the doctors that I had seen were very, very nice. They all took great, great care of me. And this was all after the first brain surgery because the shunt got infected. Um, so what happened was we all knew that my shunt was infected. At that point, with having pus spraying out of me, it was quite clear. So the second surgery was, I believe, June 24th. Don't quote me on that. It was around there. Um, yeah, I said it was pretty bad snow, but I didn't really tell anybody like the gory details like I'm going into right here. Um, so all this was the second because of the first brain surgery and the infection from in the shunt. So they took me down to get a CAT scan. And when they did the CAT scan, it revealed one huge abscess that was so massive that it was pushing on my my stomach and my lungs, and it was stopping me from eating. So I hadn't been able to eat or keep anything down for like 4 days before my surgery. And that would have been why, with how big that massive pocket of infection was. So when we think about it, it literally was insane. Here, I'll show you the picture of the massive pocket of infection. So that right there, that would be like a lung or a stomach. Obviously, this is my spine, and this is towards the front. So that you can see is the same size, basically, as this over here, and that was the massive pocket abscess of the infection which was spraying out of my stomach. So it was that massive abscess and two smaller ones. So they rushed me into surgery. My mom was there, my dad, my father, my significant other at the time. It was, again, my mom was holding my hand, and she just kept repeating, "They're gonna make it okay, you're gonna get better now." It scared the life out of me going into that surgery. And they told me they would have to clean out my entire abdomen, wash it all out, take the shunt out. So it was they cut through this. So they cut through this a second time to remove the shunt and clean that path, which had been infected. And then they had to obviously completely wash out my entire abdomen, which was filled with infection. So when I woke up, they had left me wide open, and I had a tube sticking out of me. That they could tell you that everything before surgery, and it still wouldn't give you the same factor as if you were to wake up and see it yourself. They left me wide open. This meant that not even was my abdominal cavity stitched together. They left it all open, kind of like that, and they packed it because they had to pack it and replace the packing to get out the rest of the remaining infection. And again, no amount of pain in the world was going to prepare me for what was really laid out in front of me. For the first 3 days, I still, according to my best friend Leah, when she got there on the third day, still I looked like death, and she was afraid that I was going to die. On the third day, I comprehended everything that had happened. How do I say this? I basically realized that I was on death's door, and if the infection had burst and ruptured inwards instead of going out through my incision, which you saw in the last video, then I wouldn't be here today. I am lucky I am here today. I am a fighter, I always have been, and I will continue to always want to be here. But being that sick, it's a different kind of fight. It's a willpower and a mentality that can break you if you give up hope even for a second. So the doctor came in, what I remember, on the fourth day. He looked at me and he went, "You have obviously sepsis. He said, you're in septic shock. You have bacterial meningitis because your shunt was infected. It gave you bacterial meningitis. And then I didn't know it at the time, but on my discharge paper, I also read that I had cerebritis, which meant that my brain was infected. Now, if you don't know, if you have bacterial meningitis for more than 24 hours, you're dead. It will kill you. That's why there are vaccines to prevent against it. I really suggest for anybody that can get vaccinated, I suggest you do get vaccinated because that wasn't fun. And it wasn't fun having the cerebritis, meningitis, sepsis. All the antibiotics they had me on gave me C. diff. So I was really, really dangerously sick, like all at once. And I pushed forward for 11 days. And then they told me after I displayed that I could eat a little bit, drink on my own a little bit, I could pack my own wound, and they could set me up with antibiotics. They sent me home. So after 11 days in the hospital and going through all that, I was sent home on July 3rd, which was a late birthday present to my mom. They basically said, you know, your daughter's well enough to come home, which that's a blessing all on its own. I wanted it to be on her birthday so I could surprise her because she hated being in the hospital and she hated seeing me sick even more. But I'm just happy that I'm here in general, if you kind of catch my drift there. So when I got home, I started taking photos of my wound. Now, if you are squeamish, I suggest you don't watch this next part. But before I show you the photos, I'm going to tell you now that this wound that they had me packing, again, was all the way down into my abdominal cavity. And while you can't see my organs, I couldn't do anything. I had to wear a stomach binder because my organs could come out through it. So I wasn't allowed to pick up even a gallon of milk. I wasn't allowed to bend over. I wasn't allowed to carry things. I wasn't allowed to go upstairs. I wasn't allowed to sit up in a certain way. I wasn't allowed to just lay down in a certain way. I had to live, sleep, eat, and breathe in an abdominal binder that literally pinched me as tight as an old-fashioned corset to keep my stomach pushed together so it would form. So I continued down this road of recovery. And I didn't even care that I had to be on an antibiotic pump for 8 weeks, where I had my PICC line in, which is right here. I had an IV in when I left the hospital still. I had called a PICC line where they were feeding antibiotics directly into my veins. I didn't even care that I had to wear a fanny pack with an IV pump in there. And I didn't care that I had to change that every day, that I had to reset it, I didn't care about that. I cared about the fact that they sent me home from the hospital after this major surgery with 8 hours, only 8 hours worth of pain medication. I went through this entire process with no pain medication. And with the wounds that you're about to see next, I want you to consider that and keep that in mind. Because I can't believe no doctor in their right mind would do that to somebody like me, but it happened. So be well aware that you're about to see deep gaping wounds. And I really want you to turn away if it makes you squeamish. If you think you can handle it, that's fine. I'm not going to be disappointed in any of you if you can't. open wounds aren't for everybody, and it's hard to look at and harder to imagine that it happened to somebody that you care about. So I didn't even care that my head was recovering. I didn't care that they had to cut me back open to take that out. I didn't care that the pressure would build back up at that moment because I wasn't thinking about it. I went from this right here, which is the first incision about that small. There's Trixie in the background, my little ferret being mischievous. To now, again, if you're squeamish, look away. If you can handle this, then that's okay. I went from that to this. Now, those black holes that you see lead down into my abdominal cavity. So that was after 11 days. After 11 days, it was mostly sealed at the bottom to my abdominal cavity. Snow, those black holes, to be clear, led just straight down into where my organs are. That is the area where I'm talking about there being completely no tissue. So to give you a little bit more of an idea, that is how big that wound was when I came home from the hospital with only 8 hours of pain meds. And I dealt with this wound for 7 weeks, 6.5, 7 weeks before it closed. Now, here's a better view. See how open it is? That's all the stuff that we had to use to pack it. The hospital also didn't send me home with enough supplies. So that meant that it would be very, very difficult to keep covered and well-dressed if I didn't have money. I don't know what we would have done, but we would have done anything in the world. And I know my parents would do anything in the world for me to keep me safe, as any parents would. So as it began to heal, you can see that it started closing up, but it still was massive. So that little hole right there, that's where I had the tube sticking out of me. So as it started closing up, you can tell the holes started closing, so it closed from the bottom up. So my ferret is obviously trying to come say hi. Come here. All right, Trix, there. Okay. Go be good, go play. So I started fighting in the hospital, and I didn't stop fighting until 9 weeks later. And as it still hurts, it is pretty okay, I guess. So here's a photo of me with that fanny pack on around the hip, right there. And I had the pick in that arm, so the other arm. When the wound started to close more, it started looking like that. And it was pretty okay because it wasn't as gaping, but as like I said before, I went through this without pain meds. And it's excruciating. And by packing, just to be clear, that's what I mean. You had to literally shove gauze all in there and pack it shut. And then after you got done packing it shut, you had to then cover it with another piece of gauze, put tape over it. And mind you, you could shower, but you really couldn't get that wet, or you couldn't get this wet. So I gave up with the idea of showering, and I washcloth bathed myself around everywhere. So I really didn't get a shower until, I want to say, about a week ago, 2 weeks. And you can see the red marks all around it where the adhesive started tearing my skin off, which also was excruciating because you had to keep placing the adhesive over it. So that's basically what it looked like after we switched to the smaller style of like taping it, to try to avoid the main areas where the adhesive had ripped off every part of skin before that. So the more closed it got, the more excited I got, the happier I got. The more I felt alive. I felt more refreshed. And according to my mom, the feistier I got meant that I was doing better. I had many friends that came to visit me, to make sure that I was okay. Here's some of that skin tearing to show you guys. You can see it over here, all the skin tearing. But there you can see finally where it just started to heal around the outsides and up from the bottom. Again, packing it looks like that. And we had to do that and pull it out twice a day. So that's every 12 hours. Eventually, we switched to a small Band-Aid to avoid that other outer ring where the skin had been torn off. And what you see right here, right there, that's the abdominal binder that I had to wrap around me. So eventually it started looking like that, which meant it was good, but I still wasn't getting there. So this entire process was long. It was daunting. It was upsetting. It was hard because I didn't have pain meds and I was in so much pain all the time. It made no sense. So, with everything going on, I thought that I would also show you what that scar looks like. So it looked like that when it was freshly done. And that was because, like I said, they had to take the shunt out. So basically, that scar right there is what I live with covered now. Well, I keep it uncovered. I like my hair like this. I feel like it makes me stronger. It's a part of who I am. It's part of what I went through. And I feel like if you can express yourself and what you've done and what you've been through, then the entire world can see. And you know what? With all the crap that I've gone through at this point, I want the world to see. I want them to know. So eventually, my wound started closing, which took quite a long while. See there, it's only the tiniest of slits. And I took photos every single day for God knows how long. It was exhausting and exasperating. And finally, the day came where it closed up completely. And that is where it's at today. I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. As a celebration, my mom took me to the beach And we had the famous boardwalk fries called Thrashers. If you don't know, here in Delaware, Thrashers fries are what makes the boardwalk. And having the therapy of hearing the water and being on the shoreline, it made me remember what it was like to really live and to not suffer. Now, this hurt. It still hurts even now. Stretching it hurts, and everything else hurts. So, where I stand today is not where I stood about a month ago. Um, Being that close and on death's door, it was very difficult. And like I said, I don't talk about it, but I'm talking about it on here so at least everybody can know at least once. So I don't have to say it again. I have fought hard battles. I have fought diseases that all hit me at once. And now I fought C. diff, sepsis, cerebritis, and meningitis, bacterial version, all at once. Never did I expect to go through what I went through or fight how hard I've had to fight. But keep in mind that no matter how bad things get, there will be a time where it will get better. It just takes a long time. Even now, it takes a long time. I am affected by night sweats and flashbacks of what's happened. And you can't change what you've seen. It makes you who you are. You live with it. But you don't have to let that hold you back from living and doing what you want to do. Given within health reasons, if you can do it, go for it. If you feel like you can conquer it, give it a shot. So now the news is that we're pushing forward towards my third brain surgery. There are little minor complications to figure out exactly what I need, if I need a stent or I need a shunt. So the last thing I'm going to show you is the scar that I'm left with for the rest of my life. Actually, if I get another shunt, they're going to be cutting through this side again and then back through that stomach scar that I have now, unless they decide to go on this side. So I'll just show you what so I will live with this for the rest of my life. This will never go away. And it is gnarly and it is big. And here's where I had that tube placed in. So if you can imagine what it's like to look down and see a scar like that, to feel it when you roll over because it's so deep. You can feel it. It feels like it's that deep, like when you push in on it. So if you can think about that and think about everything that somebody's gone through, if you look at me from the outside, you can't see that I have that scar. You can't see the battles that I've fought. And really just learn not to judge somebody by what they look like, because everybody walks down a different path. You may be going through hell now, but it'll get better later. And always, I want you to remember that if you can't fight yourself, lean on somebody who can fight for you. And know that there are going to be people who are strongly dedicated to you and with you that will fight by your side every step of the way, every moment, who are going to be there for you. And I wanted to share all of this because, again, it's Hydrocephalus Aware Month, and this is just a little bit of my story. So I will catch you guys next time on my crazy life, which is literally my crazy life, and fill you in on updates or just vlog some days on what's going on and how I'm doing. So like I said, remember, keep fighting, keep strong, it'll get better.